Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. As the team said, I'm Diana Kearns-Manolatos. I'm based out of New York, but very glad to be visiting Pittsburgh today with all of you. And it's been really exciting to hear about what's going on with startups, what's going on with industry, and what's going on in academia. So, as John said, I am part of a team at Deloitte called the Center for Integrated Research. And a little bit about me, I like to think of myself as someone with an engineering mindset, but a liberal arts soul. And I thought I might get into academia and become a professor, but I'm a pragmatist at heart and very passionate about how ideas can create impact for businesses. And so that led me into business research. And as we've heard already, which Carnegie Mellon is very focused on, I really look at interdisciplinary ideas. And so one of the many areas that I cover under technology is AI. It's the big elephant in every room these days, and hot off of the digital press, Deloitte published our annual study on technology investments and value. And so this is fresh data published last week. You're one of the first groups to be seeing it, and I'm really excited to be here today sharing it with you. So this is the third year we're doing this study of about 500 U.S. organizations, business technology leaders, having investment decision-making on where the dollars are going in technology. And so last year, we saw AI and data emerged as the number one focus area for digital strategies. And this was actually a step change from what we had seen in 2023. So if I get in my time machine and go back to that world, organizations were really focused on their budgets going to fundamental business transformation. And it was all about digital transformation, AI, cloud, cyber, that these three technologies together are going to have multiplier effects and really just fundamentally transform business capabilities in the way that we do business. And then there was a dramatic step change in AI capabilities that has gone from kind of 50-year cycles of innovation to 5-year cycles to 6-month cycles. And so now every product release, there is a dramatic step change in multimodal technology capabilities and what technology can do. And that's not just being pushed by academia or enterprise, but what's really different now over the last 2 years especially is it's being pushed by consumers. And so I like to think about this as the consumerization of technology. If my 9-year-old at home knows how to speak to a voice agent and ask it to do things for him, anyone can be using this technology. And we are there now. And the technology is more convincing than ever in terms of the realistic content that it can create, but not always correct. And so there are tons of new challenges that we need to be exploring as we think about where and how we're investing in AI, but also not forgetting the broader ecosystem of technology. So let's follow the money and see where things have been going. This is this year's data, 2024 and 2025. And one of the things that we've done at Deloitte, which is a little bit different from how the market in general looks at this issue, is we've looked at not just IT budgets going into technology, but we've looked at the supplemental business budget going into technology. So that might be venture, that might be business units. We heard a lot from our friends up here on stage about how every business unit has its own siloed technology that introduces enterprise architecture decisions and challenges, data challenges, right? And so we've seen over the last year, one of the trends here is that yes, technology spending has gone up, But that portion of the spend that's coming from the business is going up at a faster rate than the IT spend is going up. So this can mean a couple of things. One is IT is not being financed in the way it needs to be for the future to keep up with the rapid pace of change that's going on in the market right now. It could be a positive signal that business and technology are working closer together, and businesses absolutely bought in on the importance of AI. It could be a little bit of both. Another thing that we've looked at is the year-over-year change. And so typically as a researcher, we would look at historical trends over the last 5 years or so to project out what the future looks like. But I hope we can all agree that this moment that we're in is quite different than the historical. And so what we've done here is, just for illustrative purposes, we've looked at the change we've seen in the last 1 year from 2024 to 2025. It's a 6% change in investments as a percentage of revenue. If we just continue to increase at the current rate that we have over the last year, 32% of revenue would be going to digital initiatives from both the business and technology. The share from the business would be surpassing what IT is spending, and we would be almost to 2.5 times what we're spending now. And if you're responsible for those budgets, that's probably a scary picture. And it gets back to some of the ROI discussions that we've been having. If this is what we're spending, how do we make sure that we're creating new growth and revenue streams from our investments in technology? How do we make sure that everything that we're doing in investing in a new full stack tech native AI tech stack for the future is going to be as cost effective as possible? I want to break this down a little bit, since AI is the topic of the day, to speak about that elephant in the room. So you saw those budget increases. Now let's just look at what the spend is for AI. We asked those 550 US organizations, how much are you spending on just AI from that digital budget that we just looked at? More than half of the respondents said that between 21 to 50% of their budget was going to AI. So let's be generous and say about half the money is going to AI for a majority of companies. And only half is left for absolutely everything else. AI is a lot of different things, right? So we also asked them over the last 12 months, which specific technology capabilities have you been investing in? So we have AI and generative AI as the number one. 74% of people we spoke to are investing in that. This, again, is a longitudinal study we do. We've looked at 20 different technology capabilities for the last 3 years. For the last 2, AI has been number one. But one of the big differences this year is that it is 20 points above anything else. So as you might feel that AI is sucking up the metaphorical air in every room, it is taking all of the dollars from all of the technology priorities. New this year, we've started tracking agentic AI and robotics. So these are really strong signals that we could and probably should expect these numbers to continue on a very upward growth trajectory. And then data and insights, which 3 years ago was the number one category organizations were investing in, has been supplanted by all of these other priorities. So it is a major step change in technology capability priorities, budgets, and long-term funding models. So where's the ROI? So I have some good news for you, and then I have some pragmatism for you. So we asked respondents, you're spending a lot of money in AI. There's a lot of data out there that says many of these projects are failing or they're not showing returns. if you are investing in the technology, do you think you're getting an ROI? And I love the idea of the measurement office. In the report that we put out in previous years, we have a 5-category, 46 KPI framework. So big believer in OKRs as one of the critical methods of defining what does value mean to you and how do you track against it. But in general, we just ask them, do you think that you're getting ROI, whatever that means to you? The vast majority, more than 80% investing in AI, I think it's there. Robotics is huge. Even though few people now are investing it, only about a third, those who do, the vast majority think that they're getting ROI, followed by data insights as kind of a stalwart, and then agentic AI almost at 70%. So that's only half the picture. The other half of the picture, that's kind of a point in time of where are we now. The other thing we want to understand is where are we going, right? How do we think about AI automation on a long-term growth curve? And so this is where we kind of break apart AI automation based on the extent of automation, machine versus human decisioning, how advanced the models are you're using, and what level of business change you need to achieve in order to get there. And as we start to do that, and I'll show some data on more granular data on the next slide, but as we start to do that, we see that nearly half of the respondents expect that AI is not going to be a one and done thing. They think it's going to be at least a 3-year journey to see the promise of agentic solutions, which include advanced intelligent reasoning models as part of them. For things that are basic automation, and I think another key finding here is that just by talking about data transformation, seeing the data that you have, thinking about AI, organizations figuring out that they don't need advanced reasoning models, that actually basic robotic process automation and basic automation might make sense for them. And those programs, they see a 1-year ROI horizon for basic automation. And then as we get to the more advanced areas, 60% or so for that. As we start to think about different operating models organizations are taking to implement AI, there are kind of 3 prevalent approaches that we've seen from our research. So again, I said I'm a pragmatist. If you need a place to get started, agentic solutions could be a great way to look at legacy tech, which are, for the last 3 years has been the #1 for digital transformation in our survey, and using these agents to address legacy technology, technical debt, and create an intelligent layer on top of technology. So a few years ago, we would talk about this as like an API layer on top of your apps. So very similar to that, as the least amount of change, fastest time to market, but you're not really transforming or re-engineering the full stack. But that is an approach that we see some organizations are taking. A more bold approach is re-engineering. And so this is really rethinking a business process and how you would transform that process across a single or multiple value chains with agents. And this requires everything that the panel was talking about this morning that we know is very hard. Reshaping databases, knowledge graphs, vectorization, right? Because these advanced reasoning models, we're talking about going from a world of zeros and ones, and the difference between probabilistic models and deterministic models that just need data to be fed to them in a completely different format. So huge transformation of the way data is stored, the way data is made searchable, managed, authenticated, fed into models. And that's just the technical piece of it. There's also looking at the entire value chain of that business process. So a step change harder, but many organizations are trying to do this as well. We see about a third to a half in our survey are at this stage. Most of them are thinking about single agent transformation. The real long-term value that we see is when you really get to this third step. And this third step is not a single agent solution. It's what we would call a multi-agent system. And this is really the long-term ROI potential that we see. And as we start to talk more about agent orchestration to get the ROI from AI investments, this is what we're talking about. And so imagine a world where you have all of those silos broken down between those different business units. You have the R&D, business products, supply chain, manufacturing, distribution, not just in your organization, but also across your entire ecosystem, other organizations of agents communicating with one another. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen to get to this point. And so just, a reminder, this is where we are today. And so this is why getting from that level 1 of basic automation, that's the easy stuff. We're not changing processes. The technology actually can rely on all of the work that companies has been doing for the last 5 years to drive data insights and traditional AI solutions. It's when you start to get to levels 2 and 3 and 4 that things get harder, the transformation is bigger, the processes are changing, and we need to be thinking about 1 to 3 year horizons and 3 to 5 year horizons, which is not easy given, again, every quarter product releases are coming out. Every day, new solutions are coming onto market, and we have to think about how it all fits together across the ecosystems. So the key point here is these automation agents, single or multi-agent, are highly transformative in their potential, but orchestration, they need that conductor to help get them sounding good, right? And so there are a couple of things that are happening in the marketplace right now that we're looking at really closely. One of them is open source, right? And so companies are going to fall into different camps of how comfortable are they working with open source models, or to what extent are their foundation models going to put them into a proprietary world. Agent orchestration also requires communication. And so I think, banking is a great example. If you think about banking networks and wiring money across global organizations, there is a communication protocol that banking has standardized around for several decades. This needs to happen with agents, and there are about a dozen of these protocols on the market. And so one of the things that we foresee for orchestration to happen is a consolidation of these protocols to just a few leading ones to allow for interoperability of agents. Basically, my agent to talk to my colleague's agent in my business, and our agents to talk to your agents outside the business. And so there's also a lot of innovation going on in this space about thinking about not just the protocols, but if we think of other categories of technology innovation, a few years ago, with all of these new intelligent devices that probably everyone has in their pocket or on their table in front of them, a few years ago, we were looking a lot at the Internet of Things and IoT and thinking about how you create intelligent communication networks of devices. One of the big discussions right now is around an intelligent network of agents and how we can start to think about protocols and standards for how agents will communicate with one another as they get integrated into our workforce. So agent orchestration is a big topic. I think I've given a few headline points, but just want to reinforce a couple of them here. Very important that agents are able to understand user requests. So this, if you think about these as a kind of your tech stack for your agent, one of the critical things, I know I get frustrated when technology doesn't work, and we all want technology to work. So at the user interface layer, the agent needs to be smart enough to understand what the person who's speaking to it, prompting for it, asking for a cool image, what their intention is, what they really want, even if whether they set it that way or not. Designing intelligent workflows is going to be really key. And so this is where governance related to, right now we're at human in the loop as the standard. But as these technologies mature, they become more trusted, they become more autonomous, we give them more decision-making authority, we would be moving toward human on the loop. And eventually, for some types of tasks, human out of the loop. I can't predict what that timeline is going to be, but that is kind of the maturity curve that we're thinking will happen with autonomous agents. And so one of the steps of orchestration is thinking through those control gates for those different phases. And do you have an ambition to ever get to human off the loop, or are you always going to be human in the loop? What is your model? There's also the need to manage risks of poor communication. I think a lot of what we discussed about the data fundamentals and what I'll get to on the next slide about context is really going to be key here. Retrieval augmented generation, RAG, a very important way to bring in your own proprietary data into a foundation model for training, and then once it's actually running in production for inferencing so that it could be contextualized to your environment. And then always the business value. And this could be, how are these investments driving our long-term view in terms of market cap or return on equity for our investors? It could be, what are the specific OKRs we've set? And I mentioned our framework, so I'll just say the 5 categories of value that we typically think about in the framework are financial KPIs, customer KPIs, process-related, workforce-related, and purpose. And I heard a number of those as examples of the metrics for personalization for consumer banking this morning. And so OKRs are one way to look at it. Profitability and EBITDA is another. And I think one of the important things that we're seeing is actually all of those measures are important. And there are different people in the C-suite and the organization who care more or less about different ones. So as organizations are doing this, a model that brings together the CIO and the CTO, who largely own the IT decisions that we spoke about on the earlier slide, as well as the CFO, who's going to be driving profitability, and who also need to be helping on that decision point about reinvestment and OPEX versus CAPEX investments of when do we need to be investing for future growth. So the CIO, CTO, CFO integration is critically important for thinking about both the short-term and the long-term business value here. And so as I start to wrap up, and maybe we'll have a few minutes for questions as well, I want to leave you with these 2 visuals. So I'll actually start with the left side. So we asked our survey respondents, knowing that data is so critical to anything that we're doing with AI, what are your top data challenges for AI automation? Privacy and security of data is number 1. And this holds true across highly regulated industries, as well as consumer respondents and those in less regulated industries. we need to know that the data is secure, we can trust it, that there's no hallucinations, that there is integrity there, that there's ethics there, for people to feel comfortable in intelligent reasoning coming from agents. Very close thereafter, though, we have a three-way tie for everything we've been talking about this morning: searchability of data, reusability of data, scaling of data. And then, while it's on here, probably not as high as it should be, transforming the data, because in order to enable those first four, you really need to transform your data. Going over to the left side, I really want to talk just a little bit about the application layer for AI agents. And so, as we think about that transformation of agent orchestration and how we can really be getting the best value out of these investments, for those applications, we can be thinking about three things. The experience layer. So where are these agents leaving my organization open to opportunities as well as risks that I would need to manage from an experiential standpoint? Are these agents touching my customers? Are they touching workers? And how are we managing that experience? The agent layer is the value chain. This is the business process that you're thinking about automating. And then all of this data transformation feeds into that context layer. And so I think you'll hear from other panels throughout the day just the critical importance of this context layer. So I want to leave you with this visual as we get into some of those other sessions. I do see I have about 3 minutes left, so I'm glad to take questions if we have any.
Yeah. Hi, Diana. Thanks. The previous panel talked a bit about like the different silos that exist and these different AI solutions being developed in silos. I'm just wondering, as we start thinking about agentic orchestration, if you can talk about like some of the human orchestration that would need to take place in order to take these like siloed solutions to something across a bigger enterprise.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think one of the prevalent models that we've seen to address the human side of orchestration is thinking about centers of excellence and training. One of the early signals that we saw in our research, last year and even the year before, was that people don't know how to use these tools. Yes, they're easy to use, but at the same time, they don't understand necessarily how to be a prompt engineer, right? How do I phrase my question in a way that it's going to give me the answer that I'm looking for? They also don't understand that the agent is informed by a context layer. And so I think it's very easy to think that I can just ask this agent to do anything for me, and there are no limits. And so as part of training humans and as part of those centers of excellence, educating them on what the limits or confounds are of the AI. So this is an application that we've built. We've trained it on this data set from this time frame to this time frame, right? So giving users the context that the AI has can help better educate them on what's really possible for the AI to do and what's not possible. Because for many users, it's a black box, and they're getting these tools and think that they can ask it to do anything. So helping them to understand those guardrails and that context is very important. Another thing that we've seen some organizations thinking about doing is putting out prompt libraries. So the more controls that you want to put in place to lock things down, the more you can manage the human orchestration element of how humans are engaging with the AI agents. So there could be a suggested library of prompts, and many of the tools kind of come inbuilt with those, but you can make them organizational specific. So, I'm company XYZ in the retail space, you can ask me this, you can ask me that, you can ask me this. Companies that are much more risk averse will lock down those libraries. So you can only ask me these types of questions. And so one of the big ethical questions as well as pragmatic questions is, how do you maintain that usability and the functionality that you want users to have with the accuracy and the integrity that the data models need to have without putting the controls too tight so that you're eating away at the value? And hopefully that answers your question. Maybe one more. I know we're at time. Okay. Last one.
Hello. I'm just curious. Look like agentic is growing really fast. Do you have any data to show what verticals that agentic is moving the most? Or some examples would be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did look at this data across 5 industries and 22 sectors. There's no winning industry, though. It is across the board. If I looked at, and I had my slides up here of the sector or industry cuts, you'll see, give or take a few percentage points, it's the same, the level of investments as well as the perceived ROI. It just manifests differently, right? So in consumer, it's many of the same traditional AI applications that we've been talking about for the last 5 years in business. It's just adding greater intelligence to the reasoning layer of those models. And so I think, some of our other research shows that when you have traditional AI solutions in place, you just have a faster speed to value because you're able to draw on that infrastructure. But there's no winning industry.